It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Once again on a Friday, talking about your property news as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. November the 15th. So what's that? Halfway through the month already. And with rising affordability pressures, units are increasingly preferred by home buyers at the moment, with some suburbs seeing unit prices outpace house prices. Goodness, who would have forecast that? Are you in that situation? Well, PropTrack's Home Price Index is telling us that a national price peak in October is up 45% since March of 2020. Unit prices in the areas like New South Wales and Victoria grew faster than houses, with notable gains in suburbs like Engadine, Safety Beach and Waterford. And despite long-term house price dominance, recent data does indicate that unit price growth is converging with houses, reflecting in the strong demand by buyers who are happy to pivot into a unit. And on that note, let's take you across to WA and catch up with Matthew Hughes from Capital Advisory there in Perth for a look at the local market. And good morning to you, Matthew. How's that wind up and the last fling for 2024 going at your place?
It's going well, mate. We're the Christmas planning has started at home, and we're sort of transitioning into the shutdown that we're going to have a Christmas here, and we've scheduled the Christmas party, and it's been a really big year for us with a lot of expansion, adding new services like finance and mortgage broking recently. So it's been so busy, it's just absolutely flown by. But it'll be a good one to put behind us, and we're looking forward to next year already.
Oh yeah, the Christmas party, that'd be a pretty big knees up, wouldn't it, for you and all your friends, your family?
Yeah, we do the big family one at our house, but I was talking about the one for the team that we've got planned this year. We're heading to a friend of mine's restaurant, which is one of the top Italian restaurants in West Perth here, and taking the team out for some really nice fine dining Italian and some nice wines to finish up the year on the 20th. So it should be a good way to end the year.
Go on, give them a plug. Give the Italian restaurant a plug.
Perugino in West Perth is the top Italian restaurant over here. Ask for Francesco and mention my name, and he'll look after you.
Well, Perugino is obviously where I'm going next time I'm in Perth. So, I expect a reciprocal sort of a deal there. Well, last time that we spoke, we touched on the stock levels there in Perth. Are they still increasing? I mean, that's such a dangerous question, I feel, as I'm asking that. And where do they stand at the moment?
Yeah, still increasing a little bit, obviously off a very low base. From last time we spoke, it's probably up about another 10%. We're sitting at about 5,200 properties on the market, and about 3,500 of those are houses, or 3,400 actually. So it really feels like that excessive tightness in the market has dissipated to a degree. You shouldn't mistake it though with the market being soft. It's absolutely softened a little bit with a little bit of extra stock and a little bit less demand, but transaction levels are still very high. Days on market are still very similar to a year ago and haven't changed much from 6 months ago at the peak of the heat in the market. So it has changed, and that sort of FOMO type approach from buyers has really sort of exited the market. It's a good time for buyers to be entering the Perth market at the moment, knowing that there's still going to be upward pressure on pricing for a while, but ahead of any rate cuts, I think there's a decent little window in there where demand is just that little bit lower, with some buyers sitting around and waiting to see what happens with the RBA.
Okay, and we talk about the rental all the time in terms of what is happening with the vacancy rate. And fair to say, in different spots around Australia, there's been this equalisation, a little bit more of a stable factor creeping up, but maybe not so much for Perth's rental vacancy rate, which is still climbing. So how is that affecting the tenant demand and rental yields?
Look, there's still good demand from tenants for quality properties, and yields haven't really changed much. They've been stable at about $650 a week on the median rent for about 8 months now. What we have seen, though, is that unit rents, there was quite a large gap previously between houses and units, both on the sales side and on the rental side, and that gap is closing, to your point that you made when we opened up about the fact that people, due to affordability concerns, are being forced into units if they want to enter the market. And so that's increased demand for units, which in Perth has not historically been a thing here. We've not really had this sort of scenario where people have been forced into higher density living. And it's something that happens with any city when they mature. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane have all been through it. And it's something that's happening in Perth at the moment. So you've got good rental growth over the last sort of 2 years on both houses and units, with units sort of lagging behind. But yields are still strong, and probably I think we're second in the country in terms of yields overall. And then in terms of the vacancy rate, look, we typically rely on REWA for this data. They were showing us at 0.7% a year ago. It's now sitting at 1.9%. So that's crept up quite a bit. PropTrack, however, has Perth sitting at just over 1% across the metro area. But they have also identified that some of the investor-heavy markets like Armidale and Mandurah are sitting at around double that figure already. So regardless of how you do the math, whether it's REWA or PropTrack's methodology, it's showing that these markets that we've avoided for our clients that we thought had too much investor activity are already showing a disproportionate amount of new listings over and above the median, and now a vacancy rate that's about double that of Perth overall.
Okay, and what is happening in terms of what you're doing there in Perth for your investors? Are you still purchasing? And if so, where would you focus your investments now?
Yeah, as you know, we're buying in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth, or we can buy in all four major capitals, but we are pretty focused still on Perth for certain clients and Victoria for other sorts of clients. So what I mean by that is that I feel like the affordable options in Perth are further into their growth cycle than the higher price points, say 800K and above, as opposed to the bottom quartile of pricing. So we're not really suggesting our investor clients come into Perth if you have a limited budget. If you're at 600 or 700, I think those price points may have run most of their race already. Whereas as you edge up out of that affordability belt, I think there's still quite a bit of promise ahead, and I think a bit of growth ahead. And we're starting to see the demand, as we've spoken about previously, move up through the price points. For people with the budgets that are below that point, we're starting to look at Victoria. Depending on how low the budget is, it could be certain parts of regional Victoria, or ideally, if you have the budget, we're putting people into certain target areas that we've identified through our research as close to Melbourne as possible.
All right, so it is a Friday, all things real estate in Perth this morning. When we come back, we're going to be talking about new builds in Perth. What is actually happening in that sector? We'll talk about that next.
We help to break down real estate every day to help you better understand the Australian property market. It's time to go back to the Real Estate Vault for this week's property comment.
And is there a bit of a headspace that people have to sort of play with a little bit, sort of like buying into Hobart from the mainland?
Well, a lot of the time they've visited Hobart, but only for short periods of time and only as a tourist. So there's definitely an education process, understanding what they're trying to achieve from the move and the lifestyle that they want to gain by the move. Look, more often than not, it is those inner city suburbs. It's the ones that still offer walkability down to Salamanca or, the waterfront and cafes, but that connectivity to nature as well. So it's really kind of an education process, honing in on what they're looking for and where are we most likely to find a property that offers those attributes.
You can join the conversation every week on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Friday, starting to look ahead to another weekend around Australia. And we're talking WA property with Matthew Hughes. I see that new dwelling starts in Perth. Now, they seem to be rising. So talk to that and whether or not you expect that trend to continue.
Yeah, they've certainly been rising for a while and at an increasing rate in recent months, whether it's investors or owner-occupiers, again at the lower price points, not seeing as much value in the established market and then turning to the idea of construction. So we have seen a decent uptick, albeit again off a very low base. So we're still not building at a rate that is going to satisfy demand long term, but at least it's trending in the right direction. In terms of whether it continues to trend in that direction, I don't think so. I think the appetite for construction, having kicked off again at those lower price points, has had an impact already in a very short time frame on build costs and trade availability, and therefore time frames to actually construct. So I would caution people against building, not in all circumstances, but certainly if you don't understand the landscape, if you haven't got decent contingencies built into your plan to allow for cost blowouts or time frame blowouts or both, then I would be cautioning against building in Perth at the moment. I noticed an article last week. They spoke about the fact that back in 2018 and 2019, the typical home to construct in Perth with the time frame was sitting at around 8.7 months. And now that's sitting at 17.8 months. So it's basically doubled throughout that time frame, and now it's trending again in the wrong direction. So with the cost of money still being very high, construction may not make sense for a lot of people.
Yeah, we were just talking about that very aspect earlier in the week with Margaret Lomas. Now, just on that, are you recommending that probably people shouldn't be building in Perth, or are there exceptions to the rule? What do you think?
If the financial side is less important to you, as in if you've got a decent enough budget and income and you're less concerned with spending a little bit more to get what you want and you want to build a new home, then that's your prerogative, go ahead. But if you're building at the lower price points and you're perhaps paying rent at high rates elsewhere, you want to make sure that you're positioned to weather a long build time and higher lending costs throughout. If you're a developer, so if you're particularly small developers who are looking at sites and running feasibilities, if you're buying at today's prices and if you know how to run a feasibility study properly, odds are most sites out there are not profitable enough to be greenlit. And if you are going ahead, you're probably reliant on continued upward pressure on the value of your completed product, which building a little bit of optimism into a feasibility is fine. But I wouldn't want to be starting a project and taking on that level of risk and debt completely reliant upon that. But then conversely, we also have some clients who bought sites through us back in 2018, 19, 20, and their profits baked in because of their low purchase price from back then. So we have actually greenlit a number of projects for clients recently, and we run our feasibility and we put X dollars on the completed product in the feasibility. And then when the bank came in and actually did the as if complete valuation, it came in a lot higher than our figures, which shows that we've been quite conservative, which is a good thing because hopefully we can outperform those numbers. But there is definitely a premium on well-built quality product in good areas. And so if you do have that ability, if you have purchased your site back then at a lower price point and you can see a path to a decent profit there, a little bit less risk in terms of any market fluctuations throughout the construction time frame if you've got the benefit of that lower price point when you purchased.
Yeah, okay. So just kind of made me think about feasibility costs. If you were to, over the last 3 years, add up all of those feasibility costs that never went anywhere, not just for Perth, but right around the country, that would be a staggering amount of money down the toilet.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot more value in the feasibilities that were run and not proceeded with than there is in the ones that were proceeded with.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Good point.
And Craig, there's one thing that we haven't touched on today, mate, just conveniently for you. You haven't brought this up, but I believe we had a little bet on last time we spoke about the US election. Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah. You won the bet. Wouldn't you have preferred to have lost the bet? I mean, it's going to be hellish for the next 4 years.
I don't think either outcome was a win for anybody, so I'm not too fussed about it, but I'm glad I won the bet. And when you do come over to Perth, typically I would take you out to lunch at Perugino, but I think it's on you this time, mate.
Oh, yeah, no problems at all. That little deal I've got there, that'll work really nicely. All right, okay, enjoy the upcoming weekend and talk to you next time.
Thanks, Craig. Talk to you soon, mate.
Every morning from 6 a.m. across Australia, we deliver you the latest property news, commentary and predictions from Perth to Cairns and from Melbourne to Brisbane, 7 days a week, only on The Real Estate Podcast. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.